Jerry Rice, one of the immortal icons of American sports, etched his name into NFL history with unimaginable records and a career spanning over 2 decades. He was not just a player but the standard of perfection, a figure every subsequent generation must look up to. With over 1,500 receptions, 22,895 receiving yards, and 208 touchdowns, Rice didn't merely set records, he created a new measure of greatness. 3 Super Bowl rings, 13 Pro Bowl appearances, 10 All-Pro selections, and induction into the Hall of Fame in 2010 made him a legend among legends. From his dazzling years with the San Francisco 49ers alongside Joe Montana and Steve Young to his resurgence with the Raiders, he was always the embodiment of unyielding will. Under the lights of Candlestick Park, Rice was more than a receiver, he was a symbol of precision, speed, and courage. In every perfectly run route, people saw a blend of art and discipline, proof that greatness comes not from innate talent but from relentless work. Yet behind that radiant glory was a cost few understood. His body became a battlefield of hundreds of tears, broken bones, and unending pain. In 1997, a fateful collision tore his knee ligaments, ending his storied streak, and when he tried to return just months later, his patella shattered on his first catch. It was a historic moment, both heroic and tragic. But instead of stopping, Jerry came back stronger, pushing through pain and training to exhaustion just to run on the grass again. Each dawn, with swollen knees and an aching back, he still trained, still ran, still believed that will could conquer pain. At 62, he continues to train on Peloton, in CrossFit, running the hills of Edgewood where he once honed his craft as a young man. For Jerry Rice, pain is not an endpoint but proof that he is still alive, still fighting, and still keeping his promise to himself. No one can defeat time, but you can refuse to surrender to it. In Crawford, Mississippi, a small, poor town where red dirt roads mingled with the smell of sweat and brick dust, Jerry Rice's story didn't begin on a stadium field but among rough brick walls and the clanging of hammers. His father, Joe Rice, was a seasoned bricklayer, a man with hands cracked by cement, living by one principle: nothing comes unless you build it yourself. Each day, Jerry woke at dawn, following his father to construction sites, hauling bricks weighing nearly 10 pounds up scaffolds. The bricks burned under the Mississippi sun, cement clung to his young arms, and his 13-year-old hands bled and calloused, but Joe Rice never showed pity. "If you don't endure pain, you'll never be strong," he said, words that became Jerry's lifelong creed. The Rice household had 8 siblings, and his mother, Eddie B., was a strict woman who rarely smiled. She saw discipline as love and praise as a rare reward. In their small home nestled among pine trees and cotton fields, there were no toys, no vacations, only work, school, and God. Jerry grew up in an atmosphere where laziness was a sin and failure a shame. While friends played ball in the fields, he mixed cement with his father. While others slept in, he carried bricks. When he complained, his father said only, "You'll thank this pain later." He didn't understand until he realized those calloused hands that once lifted bricks could grip a football in a blizzard against defenders over cent-20 pounds heavier. Years later, when asked the secret of his legendary hands, Rice just smiled. "I learned it from my father. He taught me never to let anything slip from my hands." In Crawford, life was a long string of days without miracles. The town had no movie theater, no pristine fields, only farmland and men who worked to exhaustion and sat silently on porches. But in that poverty and monotony, Jerry learned 2 things: work harder than anyone and never give up. Each night, with bleeding fingers, he tossed small bricks in the air and caught them, testing how many he could catch before dropping one. No one knew that boy's game was the foundation for his legendary reflexes and precision. At B. Elmore High School, Jerry wasn't a standout student. Quiet, eyes down, he shunned attention. But with a football in hand, he transformed as if all the weight of his impoverished years found release. Fast, precise. No one could fathom how that skinny black kid could break away like that. "I wasn't faster than anyone. I just wanted to win more," he once said. Each missed catch meant self-punishment. 10 extra laps, push-ups until his arms shook. In the sweltering summer afternoons, he practiced catches alone at dusk, diving for balls, despite the pain, despite the blood. Every scrape was a reminder that success demanded pain. An old classmate recalled, "He seemed crazy. When we rested, he ran. When we drank water, he did jump squats. He didn't need anyone pushing him. He was afraid of not being good enough." Indeed, Jerry feared failure like others feared death, feared disappointing his father, feared hearing he wasn't good enough. That fear became fuel, burning through every limit. The bricks of his childhood became painful, sacred memories. On the Hall of Fame stage, Rice looked at his faintly calloused hands and said, "These hands were forged in dirt, cement, and poverty. Without those days, I couldn't have caught a single ball." From Mississippi's unfinished buildings to the Super Bowl's spotlight, Jerry's journey proved one thing. Greatness isn't born. It's built by hand, by sweat, by fear of failure, and by unshakable faith. At 17, leaving Crawford for Mississippi Valley State, he looked back at the hill where he'd carried bricks, where he'd fallen, and vowed, "I'll make these hands worth something." That simple, eternal promise became the oath of his life. Leaving Crawford, Jerry Rice entered a wider world, but Mississippi's silence followed him. In 1981, the 19-year-old received a small scholarship to Mississippi Valley State University, a tiny black college in the scorching delta, where the grass was more like dry dirt. No one thought a legend could come from there. When Jerry arrived, there were no reporters, no crowds, just rickety bleachers and rusted stands. But in that quiet place, amid creaky dorms and cheap meals, a great story began. He met Willie Totten, a fellow student and talented but unknown quarterback. They became an odd pair, one threw, one caught, united by a hunger to escape the shadow of a small school, no future. They practiced after class, under dim dorm lights, the ball's thud echoing in the fields. No spectators, no coaches watching, just two young men proving they existed. Slowly, Totten's passes and Rice's catches became legendary. Dubbed the Satellite Express, their plays soared like signals from another world. In 1983, Rice caught over 100 passes, scored dozens of touchdowns, unthinkable numbers then. In 1984, he shattered NCAA records, 112 receptions, 1,845 yards, 27 touchdown stats that forced the nation to notice. Yet newspaper mentions of his name came with a cold caveat: just small, school stats. In an NFL era biased against black colleges, players from Notre Dame or Alabama were the potential stars. Jerry, from a no-name school, was labeled raw, too slow, untested. Scouts watched him play, then left silently saying, "Too slow, too small, small school stats." To them, Jerry was just a hard-working kid with skill and drive, not polished enough for the NFL stage. But those words ignited a fire in him. After practice, he stayed on the field, catching balls in the dark under a friend's car headlights, hands bleeding. One night, Totten found him sweating, breathless, eyes blazing. "Jerry, it's dark," Totten said. Rice replied softly, "I won't let them forget my name." At Mississippi Valley State, there was no glamour, but there was something greater: unbreakable will. Coach Archie Cooley, the first to see his genius, said Rice never missed a practice, rain or pain. He called him a machine of endurance. When teammates tired, Jerry trained more. When others rested, he ran 10 extra laps. "I know they don't believe in me," he said, "so I have to work twice, 3 times as hard so they can't ignore me." In a big game against Grambling State, a name 10 times bigger, Jerry scored 3 touchdowns, shredding their defense. But when the whistle blew, no one asked his name. Reporters interviewed the losing team, praising their young effort, and left. That moment taught Jerry that greatness belongs to those who refuse to vanish. Invisible to invincible. He never said it, but he lived it. Off the field, Rice was the quiet student in old clothes, eating sandwiches, counting scholarship dollars. He walked miles to practice, no car. Each night, he wrote in a notebook, "Was I better today than yesterday?" That habit followed his career, a simple question holding his entire spirit. When his final season ended, Mississippi Valley State was no longer obscure. Big teams had to admit they'd seen something extraordinary, a player not from a prestigious system but from grit and belief that effort could defeat prejudice. For Jerry, every victory was just a start. He knew the real battle lay ahead, where NFL giants awaited, where every mistake was judged with scorn. And he, the kid from a nowhere school, with the bleeding hands of a bricklayer, stepped to the threshold of a world that thought he didn't belong. There, silence would surround him again, and he'd have to break it once more with sweat, pain, and faith that the invisible could become immortal. In the spring of 1985, New York buzzed with cheers as college stars were called in the NFL draft. In the back row, Jerry Rice sat silently, clutching a red cap for luck. No one thought the kid from a small Mississippi school would be picked early. But at pick 16, the San Francisco 49ers, reigning champions under coach Bill Walsh, made a stunning choice. With the 16th pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Jerry Rice, wide receiver, Mississippi Valley State. The room hushed, then murmured. Someone laughed. Mississippi Valley? Are they joking? The press called it a risky pick. A small school player. No fame, no blazing speed. How could he survive among NFL superstars? Jerry heard it all. He smiled, unruffled. But a fire sparked in his heart, the same fire from dusty brick yards. At the 49ers' Santa Clara headquarters, everything felt huge. The field, the media, the expectations. On the lush green field, under California's bright sun, Jerry felt like he'd entered another world. Bill Walsh, the genius, watched him with a stern, curious gaze. Walsh didn't yell. He observed every move, every breath. In early practices, Jerry fumbled, dropped passes, missed cues, ran wrong routes. Fans booed. The press sneered. Mississippi's golden boy has butterfingers. A San Francisco Chronicle headline read, 49ers wasting a first-round pick? Jerry forced a smile. But at night, clutching a football, he whispered to the ceiling, "No, I won't let them be right." Two men kept him from breaking: Bill Walsh and Joe Montana. Montana, the team's legend, told Walsh, "He's not ready, but I see something in his eyes we need." Walsh agreed and trained Jerry from scratch. Alone on the field, no reporters, no crowd, Walsh said, "Jerry, in my system, routes matter more than speed. We don't need the fastest, just the most precise." The lessons began every step: turn, breath. Walsh taught him to count time in his head, read defenses, fake with his shoulders, look up as the ball left Montana's hand. Jerry drilled one route hundreds of times until he could do it blind. In Montana's eyes, he wasn't a clumsy rookie anymore, but a man obsessed with perfection. "Jerry," Montana said one afternoon, "I'll throw, and you catch like it's your last." And Rice did a fateful, perfect catch, precise to the centimeter. That moment sealed their trust. From then on, Montana and Rice were the 49ers' soul, communicating with glances, synced by heartbeat. When Montana threw, Rice was there. When Rice turned, the ball met his hands. In Walsh's West Coast offense, requiring flawless timing, short, fast, precise passes, Jerry shone. His catches were poetry in motion, graceful, smooth, powerful. But no one knew the sleepless nights behind his calm. After practice, he stayed, rerunning Walsh's routes until the Santa Cruz sunset. Once, A groundskeeper found him practicing under dim lights and asked, "Jerry, you're not going home?" He replied, "One route's not perfect yet." In his rookie season, he made mistakes, dropped passes, drew jeers. But Montana and Walsh stood by him. "Be patient. Legends aren't made overnight." Then, in 1986, in Miami, Jerry exploded 2 touchdowns, over 200 yards. America asked, "Who is he?" The Mississippi silence became NFL thunder. Those who called him too slow went quiet. Those who said, "small school," wrote his name among legends. Deep down, Jerry remained that Crawford boy, taught that hands must work harder than dreams. When stadium lights dimmed, he ran one more lap, reminding himself glory belongs to those who endure pain and never stop learning. From Walsh's lessons and Montana's trust, a new era began, the era of Jerry Rice. After his first season, when the glow began to shimmer around the name Jerry Rice, he didn't choose parties or rest. Instead, each early morning, as San Francisco's fog still blanketed the hills, Jerry drove to a little-known road, Edgewood Road in Woodside. There, hidden among pine trees, was a steep, half-mile hill, its rough, slanted surface like a divine challenge. Locals called it the Hill. For Jerry Rice, it was more than a hill. It was a church, a battlefield, the place where he made a covenant with pain. No reporters, no cameras, just his breath, footsteps, and the thundering beat of his heart echoing in the early forest. He started at the base, in old shoes, a sandbag backpack on his shoulders, and ran not to beat anyone, but to conquer himself. Each stride tore through the air, each gasp a reminder that records come not from genius but from discipline. When teammates slept, he ran. When it rained, he ran. When his knees screamed, he ran still, until they went numb and his throat burned from dust. Someone once asked, "Why torture yourself when you're already the best?" Jerry's reply became legendary. "You can't cheat the hill. No one could deceive the hill, just as no one could deceive truth. If you were weak, it exposed you. If you were lazy, it punished you. And if you were strong enough to conquer it, it granted you something no other workout could unbreakable resolve." The hill became his personal ritual. Each summer before training camp began, he returned to Edgewood. Sometimes, curious teammates tagged along. They laughed at the start, thinking it was just a simple run. But within minutes, their laughter faded, breaths grew heavy, and they collapsed on the grass. Jerry didn't. He ran again, a second time, a third, until the sun rose high, his shirt soaked, his legs trembling. Later, legend Ronnie Lott said, "If you want to know why Jerry Rice is different, try climbing the hill once." Not everyone came back for a second try. In the 1,990 seconds, as a superstar, Rice was courted by sports brands for commercials and TV stations for interviews. But he only agreed after finishing his morning run. Once, an ESPN crew arrived early to film, expecting to catch him warming up. They got there at 6 a.m., but Jerry had already run 3 laps, sitting quietly by a tree, shoes caked in mud. When the cameraman asked, "Do you ever get tired of this?" Jerry looked at his calloused hands, smiled, and said, "Tired? If I stop, I lose myself." The hill didn't just build strength. It was where Jerry faced his fears, fear of failure, fear of time, fear of being forgotten. Each climb reminded him of the Crawford boy hauling bricks under the noon Sunday. His hands had changed color, his body grown strong, but his soul carried the same obsession: never lose. While others trained to win, Jerry trained to survive. The hill became a living symbol of Jerry Rice's philosophy. Greatness lies not in talent but in doing what others won't. When young players asked his secret to success, he didn't talk about technique or fame. He pointed to Edgewood and said, "That's where it all begins." Years after retiring, well into his 50s, he still returned to the hill, slower but steady, each step a memory, each breath a tribute. Once, during a Hall of Fame anniversary interview, a reporter asked, If you had to choose one image to represent your life, what would it be? Jerry didn't mention the Super Bowl or titles. He said, "A man running up a hill when no one's watching." The room fell silent. For Jerry, the hill was a test of the soul. He once said, "Up there, no fans, no cheers, just your heartbeat and footsteps. But that's where I feel most alive." And perhaps it was on that hill he learned his life's greatest lesson. Strength comes not from never falling, but from rising after every fall, even when no one sees. In California's early light, Jerry Rice's shadow still flickers on that same slope, no longer the young man, no longer with a legend's speed, but still a warrior who won't surrender. The hill remains, silent and proud, like his spirit, and when his ragged breaths echo in the stillness, his words return, soft yet resolute as the wind. You can't cheat the hill. The hill never lies, just as glory never comes to cheaters. It's a mirror reflecting Jerry Rice's soul, a man who didn't just run to win but to live true to himself. In the late 1980 seconds, Candlestick Park's lights burned like an eternal celebration, and at its center was Jerry Rice, rendering football's limits meaningless. With Joe Montana and later Steve Young, he forged an empire called the Dynasty, the San Francisco 49ers' golden era. Super Bowl 23, 24, X99, 3 gleaming rings on his hand, each a legendary chapter of America, each catch an epic written in speed, strength, and chilling precision. In 1988, in Super Bowl 23, with just over 30 seconds left, Montana drove downfield. Throwing a 27-yard pass, Rice leaped among 3 Cincinnati defenders, caught it clean, and crashed at the sideline. That catch sealed a 2016 victory and made him MVP of the world's biggest game. A year later, in Super Bowl 24, he erupted with 7 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then in 1995 Super Bowl 29, he did the unthinkable. 10 catches, 149 yards, 3 touchdowns. Whenever the world's grandest stage lit up, Jerry Rice made America's heart skip. At that peak, he wasn't just an athlete, he was the archetype of perfection. Young players joining the team were haunted by Jerry arriving first, leaving last. He trained with an intensity that worried coaches. Even after 3 touchdowns, he'd practice routes the next morning. When teammates vacationed, he ran the hill. When they slept, he caught balls alone under dim lights. Glory filled his wallet, but emptied his soul, a journalist wrote. Indeed, while the world cheered, he felt hollow. Each praise scared him more, knowing one day he couldn't keep it. For Jerry, greatness wasn't joy, it was duty. He had to prove weekly that his legend wasn't a mirage. In the locker room, after stunning victories, he rarely celebrated. As teammates laughed, Jerry sat quietly, unwrapping tape, staring at his cracked, bruised hands. To him, victory was just a note that tomorrow's work continued. "I've never seen anyone fear losing like Jerry," teammate Roger Craig said. Losing wasn't just a game, it was like losing part of his soul. After defeats, Jerry didn't go home. He went to the field, reran every failed play until he couldn't breathe. His body sounded alarms, knee pain, slight hamstring tears, but he saw them as part of living. In those years, Jerry dominated the NFL with unreal stats. 22,895 yards, 197 touchdowns, 1,549 receptions, records still untouched today. The world called him the Golden Hands, the man every pass found in glory's light. But the more perfect he became, the lonelier he grew. Each ring, medal, and headline built a wall between him and the world. Fame pushed others away, friends hesitated. Teammates saw him as a legend, not a man. "At the top there's no one to talk to," he said. "Just the wind and your heartbeat." In the summer of 1993, while others vacationed, Jerry trained. Bill Walsh, his great mentor, now gone from the team, sent a short letter. "Jerry, don't forget to live." But Jerry didn't know how. For him, life and football were one. He said, "If I stop running, I die." And so he became a machine, no emotions, no rest, only forward. In late afternoons, with the field empty but for the wind, Jerry stood alone, tossing a ball up and catching it. "I don't need anyone to throw," he said, "as long as I can catch." But even steel tires. By the late 90 seconds, age knocked. The body, once a masterpiece, betrayed him: tight tendons, unhealing knee pain, aching back each morning. Yet Jerry wouldn't rest. He was racing time, Steve Young said. But no one beats time. In therapy rooms, Jerry watched young teammates treated, then looked at himself, a battered legend patched with tape and needles. He gave a sad smile. "Guess this is the price of immortality." The world still hailed him, but deep down, Jerry knew what he'd lost: youth, friendship, lightness. He became a legend, but a prisoner of his fame. When asked how 3 rings felt, he said softly, "Great, but I don't remember truly living." The night of Super Bowl 29, after breaking records, as the team partied till dawn, Jerry slipped away, returned to his room, turned on a small light, and watched game tape. He rewound his catches, not to savor, but to find flaws. That was Jerry Rice's silent tragedy. A man so perfect he couldn't accept ordinary. He built an empire with sweat and blood, but that empire stole his youth. Amid the glow of 3 rings, a lone figure lingered in the night, a man running alone, in silence, as if fleeing his own glory. In the fall of 1997, at 35, Jerry Rice trained like a rookie, fighting for a roster spot. In camp, young teammates marveled as he outran them each morning, punishing himself with drills no one demanded. He still believed he could be immortal, that time could be beaten by will. On the 7th of September 1997, 3Com Park buzzed with fans for the season opener between the 49ers and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Thousands cheered as Jerry Rice stepped onto the field, his stance steady, eyes cold and focused as ever. His 13th season, and no one expected that minutes later, fate would take everything. In the first quarter, the 49ers ran a familiar play. Steve Young dropped back, scanned, threw a short pass to the right. Jerry shot forward like lightning, cut past a defender, and caught the ball mid-air. But as his foot hit the ground, his left knee twisted unnaturally. A small, chilling sound, a dry tear cut through the noise. He collapsed, tried to stand, but his leg wouldn't obey. Seconds later, he lay still, clutching his knee, face contorted in pain. The stands fell silent. Teammates knelt beside him. Cameras zoomed in, capturing tears rolling down the face of a man thought unbreakable. The diagnosis came fast: torn anterior cruciate ligament, ACL, one of the most devastating injuries for a pro athlete. Doctors said he'd miss the season, maybe never return. But Jerry refused. He looked at the medical team and said, "I'll be back this year. I don't quit anything." His words stunned not because they believed him, but because it seemed impossible. Post-surgery, when rest was expected, Jerry began defying medicine. He doubled his physical therapy, pulling resistance bands until doctors intervened. While others used crutches, he tried standing, flexing his leg, sweat streaming down his face. Doctors warned, "You're going too fast." He replied, "I don't know another way to live." At 35, every idle day felt like death. He said, "If I don't train, I'm not me." Day after day, he battled his betraying body, each step a stab of pain, each night a fight with fear. That December, the unthinkable happened. Jerry Rice announced he'd return in Week 16, just 14 weeks post. ACL surgery, an unprecedented feat in NFL history. Teammates worried. Coaches urged caution. But he insisted, "I'm ready." On the 15th of December 1997, Candlestick glowed. Thousands stood as Jerry, in his No. 80 jersey, stepped onto the field to roaring cheers. Everyone wanted a miracle, and in the second quarter, it seemed to come. Young threw, Jerry surged, caught touchdown! The stands erupted. Teammates mobbed him. It felt like the story would end there, a heroic chapter, a triumph over fate. But minutes later, as the game continued, Jerry ran another route across the field. A routine tackle and then a sharp, cracking sound. He crumpled, hands slamming the turf, face twisted in agony. Doctors rushed onto the field. This time, Jerry didn't cry, he just stared at San Francisco's night sky, where glaring stadium lights reflected in his pained eyes. The diagnosis stunned the league. A fractured patella, a complete break, the consequence of rushing back too soon. In that moment, the roaring stadium fell deathly silent. Teammates formed a circle, heads bowed. Some fans wept. Jerry was stretchered off, head lowered, a towel draped over his left knee, and everyone knew they might have just witnessed a legend's end. In the locker room, Steve Young sat motionless. Coach Mariucci was speechless. The press called it the fateful fall. Years later, in an interview, Jerry looked into the camera, voice hoarse. "I rushed it, I wasn't ready." He admitted it was his life's greatest mistake, not because of the injury, but because he hadn't known when to let go. "I was too afraid that if I stopped, people would forget me," he said, and that was scarier than the pain. After a second surgery, he spent weeks in the hospital, his knee braced with steel. Muscles withered, nights were sleepless with pain. But worse was the silence for the first time. Jerry couldn't run. He sat by the hospital window, watching distant streetlights, listening to rain, feeling the world move without him. For a man who lived to win, being forced to sit still wasn't just physical pain, it was an existential shock. The 1,997 fall didn't just break his knee. It shattered the invincible image he'd built. He realized his body wasn't iron, and no matter how great his will, it couldn't reverse time. But in that moment, a different man was born. Not a record-breaking machine, but a soul that knew limits, pain, and loss. That season ended without him. The 49ers played on, stands still roared, but Jerry Rice became a spectator of the world he once ruled. Each time stadium lights shone through his hospital window, he closed his eyes, hearing the wind carry the sound of that night's breaking bone. He knew it wasn't just a knee shattering, it was the sound of truth. Even legends bow to human limits. But if Jerry Rice's story ended there, it would only be tragedy. He wasn't born to fade in darkness. In that brokenness and solitude, he rekindled a flame slower, weaker, but brighter than ever. The hill at Edgewood waited, and Jerry knew he'd climb it again someday. Not to win, but to find himself. As the first metal pins braced his knee, Jerry lay still on the operating table, white lights glaring down on his sweat-soaked face. Doctors said if all went well, he might walk normally, but playing again was near impossible. They said that because they'd never met anyone like Jerry. In early recovery, he lived between two worlds, half man, half steel. His knee, held by metal frames, creaked with each step, a faint, bleeding melody of resilience. Medicine called it a miraculous recovery. Jerry called it redemption for rushing, for forgetting that even humans need to pause. Through the winter of 1998, as the 49ers played without him, Jerry spent each day in physical therapy. Doctors urged patience, but he arrived before the gym opened and left after everyone else. He bent his knee until sweat pooled, walked on balance beams until his legs shook, and each stabbing pain made him close his eyes and whisper, "One more step." That mantra he repeated hundreds of times daily. When reporters asked why he kept trying, Jerry said, "I don't want to end on a stretcher." It took nearly a year to run again. Not as fast, but each step was a miracle. In the 1999 season, he returned to the field to choked cheers. No one believed a man with a shattered patella could play at NFL level, but he did. Each catch was a triumph of will. His body carried steel, but his heart remained human. The press dubbed him Rice the Cyborg. They said he was a machine tireless, fearless, relentless. But those who saw his eyes that day glimpsed a quiet sadness, as if each catch cost him a piece of his past. Jerry never bragged about the pain. When asked how it felt post-injury, he said, "I can still run, and that's enough." But teammates knew he spent hours icing his knee each morning before practice. When the team hit the field, he was the last out of therapy, face resolute, eyes quiet. Jerry didn't just beat the injury, Steve Young said. He beat the fear it brought. In 2000, at 38, Jerry Rice racked up over 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns, stats many young players only dreamed of. In 2001, he did it again, becoming the first 8-year-old in NFL history to achieve that feat. The sports world called it a miracle. He called it duty. He said, "I came back, not to prove anything to others, just to prove to myself I still could." In the locker room, old friends left one by one. Joe Montana retired. Bill Walsh passed. Steve Young hung up his cleats after a severe head injury. Each departure took a piece of Jerry's soul. The 49ers had changed, new faces, new music, new talk. He sat in his corner, wiping his red and white shoes, silent like a keeper of an ancient temple. "I used to hear Montana's laugh in this corner," he said in a small interview. "Now it's just the wind." Yet he refused weakness. Each game, Jerry appeared as if he'd never left. Steel knee, taut muscles, steady breaths, he seemed one with the field. His roots were still so perfect coaches used them to teach rookies. A rookie once said, "When Jerry runs, you can hear the NFL's heartbeat in his steps." But deep down, he knew he wasn't the same. Sometimes, mid-game, a dull knee pain flared, reminding him no one beats time. He stayed silent, swallowed the pain, and ran on. Each yard, each catch wasn't just a score, it was proof his fire still burned. When the whistle blew, as teammates celebrated, Jerry often stood alone in the field's center, gazing at the stands where golden lights bathed his sweat-soaked eyes. Perhaps he thought of hospital days, the sound of breaking bone in 1997, and his own vow, "I will return," and return he did. Quietly, without fanfare, with steady steps and hands strong as stone. In 2002, at 40, Jerry Rice once declared, "Career over," posted 1,211 yards and 7 touchdowns with the Oakland Raiders, helping them reach the Super Bowl. America saw him again, not as an invincible idol, but as a flesh and blood man, surviving pain and reborn in steel. With each catch, he told the world, "I'm still here." But behind the lights, back in the locker room, he sat alone, unwrapping his knee, watching metal scars glint under the light. He knew he'd outrun a sporting death, but youth remained on the field of yesteryears. In that silence, Jerry Rice wasn't the cyborg of headlines, he was human, made of blood, tears, and a heart that wouldn't stop beating for the game that defined him. In 2001, as California mornings grew colder, Jerry Rice walked into the San Francisco 49ers office, where he'd spent 16 years, where every drop of sweat, blood, and tears had bled into the red and gold of his jersey. The general manager looked at him with sad eyes. "Jerry, we're restructuring. We won't renew your contract." The room froze. He didn't rage or react, just nodded slightly. Deep down, he knew this day would come. But as he left the headquarters, the 49ers logo behind him felt like an unhealing wound. No more Joe Montana, no Bill Walsh, no morning laughs with Steve Young before practice. All were past. Only Jerry Rice remained a lone old soldier wanting one more fight, though his heart was weary. He signed with the Oakland Raiders, across the San Francisco Bay, a new start, but also a wordless goodbye to his old home. At the press conference, he said, "I still love this game. I don't know how to live without running." His words moved the press, but all saw the loneliness behind his resolute eyes, the solitude of a man who didn't know how to stop. In Oakland, Jerry was no longer the universe's center. He became the quiet veteran in a young lineup, a shadow of a bygone era, but instead of fading, he shone once more. In 2002, at 40, he posted over 1,200 yards and led the Raiders to Super Bowl XXX7. Though they lost heavily to Tampa Bay, Rice scored a touchdown proof, his heart still pulsed with the field. After the game, as lights dimmed, he sat alone on the bench, watching confetti fall slowly in the wind. No more crowd roars, just the sound of janitors sweeping. A reporter approached. "Jerry, do you think you'll stop yet?" He gave a small smile. "When I can't see the light in my eyes, I'll know." But that light didn't fade, only softened. In later years, he joined the Seattle Seahawks, wearing unfamiliar green. No old friends, no crowds chanting his name like at Candlestick. On the field, he still caught, still ran. But to fans, he was a different Jerry, slower, quieter, a ghost of the old legend. Each catch was now a battle with his body, time, and his own memories. A young teammate recalled, "Once, he was in the gym at 5 a.m., running routes alone, silent. When I asked why, he said, 'If I stop, I disappear.'" Records piled up: 208 touchdowns, 22,895 yards, untouchable numbers. But Jerry smiled less. Interviews grew shorter, his eyes heavier. When Bill Walsh died in 2007, he attended the funeral in a black suit, standing at the back, silent. Afterward, he sat alone by wooden pews, staring at Walsh's photo, eyes misty. "I lost the first person who believed in me," he whispered. "Everything began and ended with him." Finally, in 2005, after a brief season struggling to find a place, Jerry Rice retired. The press conference was modest, a small room, a few familiar reporters, a cold coffee. He spoke, voice trembling. "It's time I leave the field, but football will never leave me." Those words closed an era. The next day, headlines read, "He left the field, but the field never left him." As night fell, Jerry drove across the Bay Bridge, city lights reflecting on the water. In the distance, Candlestick Park still glowed where he'd made legendary catches, where his name was once a prayer. Now, a radio played an old Super Bowl broadcast, the announcer's voice ringing, "Rice catches it at the 10, touchdown San Francisco." Jerry chuckled, then fell silent. That smile was proud, yet pained the smile of a man who gave everything, left only with memories. Post-retirement, he appeared on a few TV shows, some honorary events, but without zeal. He once said, "I thought I was ready to leave football, but every morning I hear the sound of leather on leather in my head, see myself running, and in Woodside's quiet dawns, some still saw a silver-haired man running on Edgewood's familiar slope, slower, older, but steady, as if he'd never stopped. No more crowds, no stage, just wind, breath, and footsteps blending into fog. The hill stood, silent witness to a man who held both glory and loneliness. And if you passed by, you might hear a whisper in the breeze, the legend speaking to himself. He left the field, but the field never left him. After leaving the football field, Jerry Rice thought his life could finally slow down, that after decades of racing against time, he could learn to stand still. But it turned out, the hardest thing for the man who caught every pass in the world wasn't holding onto the ball, but holding onto the moments slipping through his hands. His wife, Jackie Mitchell, had been by his side since his days as an unknown rookie in Mississippi Valley. They met when Jerry was new to the NFL, when money was scarce. Fame hadn't arrived, only faith, simplicity, and dreams of a home. Jackie was the one who packed him sandwiches every morning, waited for him to return from late practices, and wiped the mud and sweat from his training gear. When Jerry ran up Edgewood Hill, Jackie stood at the bottom, holding a bottle of cold water. When he signed his first contract, she cried out of joy, not for the money, but because their sacrifices had paid off. They had 3 children, Jackie, Jerry Jr., and Jada, 3 small pieces of what seemed like a perfect life. But as the Super Bowl lights shone brighter, shadows began creeping into their home. The more famous Jerry became, the less he was there. In the 90 seconds, when his youngest daughter had her birthday, he was at training camp. When his son played high school football, he was shooting a Nike commercial. When Jackie called to ask, "Are you coming home?" he'd say, "Soon." But Jerry's soon could mean days, weeks, even months. After retiring, the void wasn't filled with love, but with new work. TV shows, promotional events, golf, talk shows, autograph signings, and endless media deals. He no longer chased defenders, but he chased something else, the feeling of being noticed, celebrated, of still being useful. Many thought Jerry Rice had it all. But at home, Jackie was slowly becoming a stranger to her own husband. "You always knew how to catch the ball at the right moment," she once said in a later interview. "But you never knew how to stop and hold me." In 2009, after more than 20 years together, they officially divorced. The press covered it in a few brief lines, but for Jerry, it was a different kind of fall, quiet and more painful than any injury on the field. He once said, "I won on the field, but I lost in my own home." When Jackie left, the sprawling Atherton house felt so empty he didn't play music or turn on the TV. Those evenings, he sat on the couch, staring at a family photo, realizing for the first time that fame couldn't buy back time. In the years that followed, Jerry tried to be a better father. He showed up more for his kids, especially Jerry Rice Jr., who followed in his father's football footsteps. But even in that effort, he carried the hesitation of someone who'd lost too much. "I wasn't there when my kids needed me," he said on an ESPN show. "I can't blame football, because that was my choice." Then in 2019, when the spotlight had dimmed, when his hair had grayed and his knees ached every morning, Jerry reconnected with Letitia Palaio, a longtime friend. Quietly, without fanfare, Letitia came into his life like a gentle breeze after a long storm. They'd known each other for years but only grew close when he was weary of the public stage. Letitia didn't love the legend Jerry Rice. She loved the ordinary man who forgot things, brewed coffee too strong, and quietly gazed at the garden each morning. They married in a small California ceremony with just a few close friends. Jerry wore a gray suit, smiling awkwardly as he exchanged rings. No flashing cameras, no cheering crowds, just the peace he'd never known in his life. When asked about Letitia, he simply said, "She taught me to listen. My whole life, I only heard the crowd. Now I hear the person I love." In Letitia's eyes, Jerry wasn't an NFL legend but a 60-year-old man who still tried to run in the morning despite knee pain, forgot to turn off the kitchen light, and would leave the dinner table just to pick up a spoon she dropped. With his kids, Jerry found a rhythm of connection again. He made time to watch Jerry Jr. coach football, called Jada every week, and often walked with Jackie. In a 2020 interview, he said, "I used to think I was defined by yards and touchdowns. Now I know I'm defined by the people waiting for me at home." Jerry Rice's family story isn't perfect, but in its imperfection lies a different kind of beauty, the beauty of redemption. He was the man who caught every ball but dropped the most precious moments. And looking back, he doesn't deny it. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can love better today." Now, in a modest woodside home, Jerry lives with Letitia. In the afternoons, they walk a low hill together, and sometimes Jerry talks about Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, the hill, but his voice is softer now. Letitia smiles, holds his hand and says, "You don't need to climb anymore, Jerry. You're already at the top." He laughs, his eyes gentle, like a man who's finally found his last place to rest. After years living in the roar of the crowd, Jerry Rice learned what the field never taught him. Greatness isn't about never dropping the ball, but about bending down to pick it up with love, forgiveness, and peace. In the years after finding peace with Letitia, Jerry Rice's life still had an unclosed chapter, the one about the son he hadn't been brave enough to face. That was Brendan Rice, born from a brief relationship with Jakarta Edwards, a young woman in Colorado in the late 90s. When Brendan was born, Jerry was at the peak of his career with the 49ers, consumed by practices, endorsements, and the media spotlight. The boy grew up mostly with his mother, carrying the Rice name but without a father at his birthdays, first football games, or early falls. For Jakarta, the name Jerry Rice became a wound both proud and bitter. Brendan learned about his father through TV, not from bedtime stories, but from commentators on old Super Bowl reruns. The greatest receiver in NFL history, Jerry Rice. When friends asked, he'd smile, say briefly, "Yeah, that's my dad," and go quiet. Deep down, Brendan was both in awe and angry. He vowed to be just as great, but without relying on that name. Jerry, meanwhile, carried an unspoken guilt. He knew about Brendan, knew his son was growing up without him, but he didn't know how to step into his life. Football, fame, and old wounds made him afraid of rejection, afraid to face the consequences of choosing glory over family. "I had everything," Jerry later said, "but when I thought about Brendan, I felt like I had nothing." It wasn't until Brendan was in high school that their fragile bond began to mend. One day, Jerry drove to Colorado unannounced, just to stand silently and watch the 16-year-old practice on the field. Brendan was nearly as tall as his father, running with the same precision and strength, arms open as if born to catch the ball. After practice, Jerry approached. They stood in silence, no hugs, no words. Finally, Brendan said softly, "I knew you'd come." Those simple, profound words bridged years of distance. From that day, Jerry tried to make amends not with fame, but with presence. He flew to watch Brendan's games whenever he could, sitting in the stands with Jakarta, unnoticed by reporters. Each time Brendan caught a ball, Jerry clapped softly, his eyes shining as if seeing himself 20 years earlier. "I don't want to be a legend to him," he once said. "I just want to be his dad." Brendan began carving his own path, one seemingly fated. He played for the University of Colorado, then transferred to USC, where great players are forged into stars. The media called him Rice Jr. too, but Brendan insisted, "I'm not a copy, I'm me." Still, in every run, every catch, you could see Jerry Rice discipline, focused eyes, hands that never shook. When asked about it, Brendan just smiled. Maybe legacy isn't just genes, it's spirit. End. Jerry watched every game on TV, sometimes sitting among college students in a low-pulled cap, just to see his son run. He rarely talked strategy instead. He told Brendan about the hill, the foggy morning runs, the mantra, "You can't cheat the hill." And Brendan understood. The legacy his father left wasn't just records, but how to face pain and limits. In April 2024, the NFL Draft took place in Detroit. In a brightly lit auditorium, Brendan sat with his mother, hands clasped, waiting. Jerry sat in the crowd, not at the VIP table, no cameras on him. He didn't want to make the moment his own. When the Los Angeles Chargers pick was announced, the host's voice rang out. With the 105th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Brendan Rice, wide receiver, USC. The sound hit like a bell of redemption. The room erupted. Jakarta broke into tears. Brendan leapt up, hugging his mother. In the back, Jerry Rice, the man who'd heard his name cheered thousands of times, quietly bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. He didn't rush the stage or give a speech. He just clapped, his hands trembling. A nearby reporter later said, "He cried like he was hearing his own name called again." After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned, Brendan found his father in the hallway. They hugged for a long time, no words needed. Jerry whispered, "I'm proud of you. You did what I dreamed of. You held the ball and didn't drop your family." Brendan gripped his father's shoulder and replied, "No, Dad, you taught me that." That moment was a reconciliation across generations, one who lived to win and one who learned to live for love. Jerry once said football took so much from him, but in Brendan, he saw everything he'd lost: faith, resilience, and love that didn't need proving. Now, every time the Chargers play, Jerry sits in the stands, not as a legend, but as a father. When Brendan scored his first NFL touchdown, Jerry just nodded, eyes wet. In that moment, he didn't see the stadium or the cameras, only a boy running on his own imaginary hill, following in his footsteps. Brendan Rice isn't just Jerry Rice's son. He's the living torch of a legacy, proof that love, even if late, can heal the deepest voids. And when someone asks Jerry how it feels to see his son carry on his career, he just smiles, his voice low but full of pride. The day I left the field, I thought it was over. But watching my son run, I know the real legacy never retires. After the sacred moment of seeing his son called at the NFL draft, Jerry Rice thought the final chapters of his life would be only peace, honor, and pride. But fate, as always, tests even those who've weathered every storm. In 2015, during a seemingly harmless radio interview, Jerry was asked about the difference between his playing days and the modern NFL. He smiled, casually saying, "Back then, we used stickum, a sticky substance to help grip the ball." He added, "Everyone did it. It was normal back then." That offhand memory, meant as a light anecdote, exploded like a media bomb. Just hours later, headlines flooded sports pages. Jerry Rice admits to using stickum. Cold words and skeptical comments poured down like rain. Are his records truly pure? Did even the legend cheat? The internet split. Half defended him, saying, "Everyone did it back then." The other half felt betrayed, as if a piece of their childhood had been tarnished. Jerry didn't dodge. He faced the criticism head-on. In a later interview, he spoke slowly, eyes calm but heavy. "I told the truth. I used it a few times, long before the rules were strictly enforced. Back then, it wasn't a sin, it was part of the game. But I understand, even a small scar can dim an entire statue." People expected him to lash out, to justify himself. But he didn't. He accepted it. "I'm not perfect," he said, "and I never tried to pretend I was." Those who knew Jerry understood this confession wasn't weakness but belated humility, a courage only found in someone seasoned enough to fear no loss of image. He knew some wouldn't forgive, but he also knew silence would bleed his conscience. Years earlier, while still playing, Jerry said his greatest fear wasn't failure but being seen as a liar. So when the stickum truth spread, he chose not to run. "If I didn't speak, I couldn't face myself," he shared. "Sometimes fame needs to be cleansed with truth, even if it hurts." The media storm eventually quieted, and fans began to see that stickum wasn't about cheating but about a different era, where players lacked specialized gloves, where games unfolded in rain, snow, and blood. For Jerry, it wasn't an excuse but context for a harsh world where survival came before perfection. Months later, at a Stanford University talk, a student asked, "Do you ever regret admitting it?" He smiled, eyes kind. "No, I regret not saying it sooner. I spent my life chasing perfection, but I realized greatness isn't in perfection, it's in honesty." The room fell silent. This wasn't Jerry Rice, the NFL's invincible hero, but a man facing himself, unafraid of scars, unafraid of losing glory. After that, he became more relatable. People no longer saw him as a god but as a real man who erred, fell, and learned to be honest with himself. At events, he told young players, "When you see someone too perfect, remember, the brightest light casts the deepest shadow." Jerry Rice never left a major stain on his career, but that small scar made him more human, more real, more beloved. The hands once hailed as perfect now bore a tiny crack, and like a flaw in an ancient bronze statue, it made the light reflecting off them even more beautiful. In his later years, when asked about the scandal, Jerry said softly, "I don't try to make anyone think I'm perfect anymore. I just want them to know I'm honest." He smiled, the smile of a man who'd faced the world and himself. And as the reporter noted his final words, he spoke what became his later life philosophy: "Greatness isn't perfection, it's honesty." At 60, while most peers sought rest, Jerry Rice still began each day like it was the morning before a Super Bowl. His Woodside, California home echoed with his footsteps on the wooden floor at 5 a.m. No longer the strides of an NFL legend, but the quiet sound of a man refusing to let time dictate how he lives. His knees stiffened in cold weather. Shoulders ached post-workout. Finger joints less nimble, but he still rose, donned gloves, and stepped onto the old Peloton in the garage. Each pedal turn was a silent dialogue with his body. After cycling, he did light CrossFit, then jogged the small forest behind the house, his massive Mastiff Bronco at his side. With each morning breeze, he inhaled deeply, feeling muscles stretch, old knee scars twinge not as enemies, but gentle reminders. He was still here. "Pain reminds me I'm still alive," he'd say, half serious, half joking. Many heard toughness, but his voice held gratitude. The 60-year-old Jerry Rice no longer ran to prove anything, but to accept. Once he fought time, seeing every wrinkle, every injury as betrayal. Now, sipping hot coffee after training, watching dawn spill through the window, he no longer needed to control everything. "When I was young, I wanted perfection," he said recently, "but I learned sometimes the best thing is to let time pass without fighting it." Some mornings, he paused mid-run, not from fatigue, but to hear leaves rustle, to see light filter through branches. Years ago, he saw only goals: next yard, next game, next record. Now he smiled at a bird landing by the path. "I spent my life running, but what I was always chasing was a moment to stand still," he told a close friend. His knees still ached when winds turned. Old surgical scars sometimes throbbed, but he didn't complain. He saw them as memories, like old medals, torn jerseys smelling of sweat and grass. "They remind me I lived fully," he said. "And the price of living fully is sometimes a worn-out body." At noon, Jerry often cooked with Letitia. Their meals were simple: grilled fish, greens, a small glass of wine. She teased that no one took salad as seriously as him. He laughed, saying after years of military-like diets, knowing who he ate with was enough. Sometimes, when his knee hurt too much, he sat still, letting Letitia brew ginger tea and rest her hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to prove anything anymore, Jerry," she said softly. He nodded, not arguing. Perhaps that was what took him a lifetime to learn. Letting go wasn't weakness, but another kind of strength. At dusk, Jerry walked Bronco to Edgewood Hill. No longer running, he strolled, breathing deeply. The slope was still steep, still long, still defiant, but he no longer saw it as an enemy. "I used to climb to beat it," he said. "Now I climb to thank it for making me who I am." And discipline remained, but no longer sharp like a blade, now gentle like a heartbeat of a man who'd learned to love his wounds. He trained regularly, not for fitness, but to keep a promise to himself, to live each day with gratitude. At his 60th birthday interview, a reporter asked, "What's different between today's Jerry Rice and 30 years ago?" He paused, then said, "I used to want to control everything. Now I just want to be present in everything." Always. At night, the house quiet, he read or called his kids. Sometimes, Brendan sent training videos, and Jerry just nodded. No judgment, no advice, only saying, "Good job, son. Don't forget to enjoy it." At 60, he was no longer chasing greatness, but cherishing the humanity in himself, something he'd forgotten in his running years. His body carried steel, but his soul was soft as morning dew. Each dawn, opening the window, sunlight bathing his wrinkled face, Jerry smiled, picked up his old 49ers cap, and whispered, "Thank you for another day." In that moment, the man who'd beaten defenses and been felled by time had learned his greatest lesson. True strength lies not in control, but in acceptance. One fall morning, California's sky glowed soft gold, and Jerry Rice parked before the narrow trail to Edgewood Hill, the slope he'd never forgotten. The familiar path wound through pines, dry grass golden on both sides. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him was Brendan, now an NFL pro, and 8-year-old Jalen, his first grandson, in a tiny 49ers jersey with number 80 on the back. 3 generations, 3 heartbeats on the same hill where Jerry's glory, pain, and love began. The morning breeze carried pine resin and memories. Jerry touched his knee, joints occasionally creaking, but he smiled. "Ready?" he asked, voice raspy. Brendan nodded, and Jalen took a deep breath, eyeing the seemingly endless slope. "Grandpa, this hill's too steep," he said. Jerry knelt, hand on his shoulder. "It is, but it's never steeper than what's inside you." They started running. The first steps were slow, breaths blending with the wind. Jerry felt his soles hit the ground. Each step waking old spirits, the Crawford boy, the youth training under blazing sun, the legend who stood atop the world. Now, they all ran with him, in the form of memory. Brendan ran beside, movement strong, arms catching the breeze like his father's echo. Jalen laughed, breaths quick but eyes blazing, the eyes of someone yet to know limits. Midway, Jerry paused, hand on chest. His heart raced, not from exhaustion, but emotion. He looked around. Nothing had changed. The old rock where he'd rested, the worn path where he'd slipped, the sky clear as in his youth. Only one thing differed: his hair now white, and beside him, his bloodline carried on this climb. Brendan noticed his father stop, turned back, half worried, half smiling. "Tired, Dad?" Jerry shook his head. "No, just thinking. This road once swallowed me. Now it's brought me here with you." Brendan went quiet, then said softly, "As a kid, I didn't get why you trained like a madman. Now I do. You didn't run to escape fear. You ran to keep faith." Jerry smiled, eyes misty. "I just wanted you to learn that without so many years." They climbed on. The sun rose, fog lifted, golden light bathing 3 figures. Jerry felt his breath sink with Brendan and Jalen's steps. The little boy occasionally turned back, smiling, then pressed on. To any onlooker, it was cinematic time, not an enemy, but a thread tying generations. Near the top, Jerry stopped again. He pointed to a large rock where he'd once carved "No excuses" with a broken brick. The etching was faded, moss-covered, but still there, a witness to his old vow. He whispered, almost to himself, "I kept my word, Hill." Then, turning to the others, voice trembling, "See this. This is where I became me, where pain taught me strength, and faith taught me how to live." Brendan rested a hand on his father's shoulder, while Jalen looked at him with awe, innocent yet profound. "Grandpa," he asked, "were you ever scared of this hill?" Jerry chuckled, shaking his head. "Plenty of times. But you know, courage isn't not being scared, it's moving forward despite it." Together, they climbed the final steps. At the summit, they stood panting, gazing at the vast valley below. San Francisco shimmered faintly in the morning sun, where Jerry had known triumph, glory, loneliness, and finally peace. He spread his arms, breathing deeply. In that moment, there was no past, no age, only the shared breath of 3 generations bound by one belief. Effort is the only timeless language. Jalen picked up a small stone, handing it to him. "This is yours." Jerry gripped it, eyes gleaming with pride. "No," he said. "This is ours." The 3 sat, the breeze carrying light laughter and long breaths of the rice generations. In Jerry's eyes, the hill was no longer a symbol of challenge. It was the start and end, where a boy learned to be a man, a father learned to love, and an old man learned to pass the torch. As they descended, sunlight cast 3 long shadows on the old path. Jerry glanced back at the summit one last time, where he'd spilled blood, sweat, and part of his soul. Then he spoke softly, voice warm in the wind. "You can't cheat the hill, but you can teach the next one to climb." That statement wasn't just for Brendan or Jalen, but for himself, the man who climbed every hill in his life, from Crawford to Candlestick, from glory to peace. And now, at 62, Jerry Rice finally understands that what matters isn't how many hills you conquer, but the path you leave for others to keep climbing. As the sun sets over Santa Clara Valley, the last golden light falls on the record plaques hanging in the Hall of Fame, where Jerry Rice's name is etched in eternal letters. 22,895 yards, 208 touchdowns, 3 Super Bowl rings, and over 1,500 receptions, numbers that not only surpassed every limit, but transcended the measure of sports. They call him the GOAT, greatest of all time, and more than half a century later, no one dares touch that title. But if you only look at the numbers, you miss the most important thing. Jerry Rice's legacy isn't in the records, but in the spirit behind them. From the Crawford kid catching bricks under the midday sun to the gray-haired man still climbing Edgewood Hill, Jerry wrote a story America always wants to believe, that strength comes not from luck, but from labor, that greatness isn't born, but forged. Over his 20-plus-year career, he never stepped onto the field without at least 2 hours of practice beforehand. He never saw a loss as fate, only as an unfinished lesson. When teammates slept, he ran. When they rested, he climbed hills. When they said, "Enough," he said, "A little more." That work ethic, more than golden hands or superhuman speed, made Jerry Rice the model of an America built on labor and the drive to rise. But Jerry's true legacy doesn't just live on the field. It lives in the transformation of a man after his falls. He broke his knee, was forgotten by the world, lost his family, and faced loneliness in his own glory. Yet each time he fell, he rose not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet resolve of someone who believed pain doesn't kill you. It just reminds you you're alive. "Pain reminds me I'm still alive," he once said. And America understood that wasn't just about the body, but the spirit, the thing that kept him, and a generation moving forward despite a changing world. When Brendan the son, once so distant, was called at the NFL draft, Jerry was no longer an athlete or a legend, but a father learning to love again. The image of him sitting quietly in the stands, tears falling as his son's name was announced, might be the most beautiful moment of his life. No cheering crowd, no scoreboard, no records, just continuation. And perhaps in that moment, Jerry Rice reached the highest form of greatness, passing on the flame instead of keeping it for himself. When asked what he's most proud of, Jerry didn't mention yards, Super Bowls, or MVP awards. He said, "I'm proud I never cheated my work. I'm proud I always got back up." Once, in a speech at Stanford, he told students, "Greatness isn't in how high you climb, but in how you rise after falling." The room went silent, then stood to applaud. In an era where victory is often measured in numbers, Jerry Rice reminded them that a person's true value is measured in character. Today, every Super Bowl season, Jerry Rice's image still flashes on screens, still the face of an immortal era. But beyond the spotlight, he lives quietly in California training, tending his garden, spending time with his wife, children, and grandchildren. Someone once asked, "Do you miss the field?" He just smiled. "I didn't leave the field. I just changed where I stand. Now I stand on the sidelines, watching others run, and I'm happy." In the final days of his journey, Jerry Rice doesn't carry glory, but lessons. That labor is a religion, discipline is a prayer, and love, even if it comes late, is life's greatest reward. He climbed every hill, broke every limit, not to prove his greatness, but to show that people can become immortal when they're honest with their pain. In the Hall of Fame, below the plaque with his name, a small inscription reads, "The hands that caught history." But if they could add another line, it might be, "Now hold a legacy that will never drop." The hands that caught history now hold a legacy that will never fall, not in titles, but in faith. Faith that everyone has their own hill to climb, and what matters isn't how fast you reach the top, but never cheating the path. Jerry Rice, NFL legend, the man who beat every defense, but also the man who learned to surrender to time with humility and gratitude. He taught America that victory isn't in the cheers, but in the quiet of discipline and humanity. From the hands of a poor Mississippi bricklayer to the hands of football's greatest icon, that journey is a symphony of labor, love, and redemption. And when the final lights go out, Jerry Rice doesn't vanish. He's still there in every catch by a kid dreaming of the field, in every American who believes effort can defy fate. Because a legend, at its core, isn't the story of the greatest, it's the story of the one who never gave up. If you believe in those values, if Jerry's story reminds you that resilience, honesty, and love are what make America leave a like, subscribe to the channel and join us in telling the stories of those who made the impossible possible. Thank you for joining us through this story. And remember, those hands that caught history now hold a legacy that will never drop. Reading Jerry Rice's journey, I feel both sorrow and admiration. Sorrow for the immense cost of greatness, admiration for how he turned every wound into a guiding light. From the Crawford boy catching bricks for his father on construction sites, those bleeding hands became the golden hands of San Francisco in Bill Walsh's West Coast offense, taught from steps to breaths, from early days jeered for dropping too many passes to earning Joe Montana's full trust and exploding in Super Bowls 23, 24, 29. Then a tragic cut. Week 1, 1,997. A torn ACL. A reckless return in Week 16, catching a touchdown, only for his patella to shatter the dry crack under candlestick's lights, the sound of shattered illusions of immortality. Rice later confessed, "I rushed it. I wasn't ready," only to rise again from 1,999, 2002, at 40, still posting 1,200-plus yards, dubbed Rice the Cyborg, but reminding, "Pain reminds me I'm still alive." As fame settled, he faced the honest scar of Stickum with truthfulness and found family. A quiet remarriage to Letitia, silent tears when the Chargers called Brendan's name in the 2024 NFL Draft. The image of 3 generations climbing Edgewood Hill, where he closed his story with, "You can't cheat the hill, but you can teach the next one to climb," reminds Americans today. Greatness lies not in the heights we reach, but in how we rise, honest and resilient, in a culture often swept by quick wins. The practical lesson is simple. Hard work trumps excuses, pain is a signal of life, honesty about scars, and time for those we love, because the hands that caught history should ultimately hold tight to values that never slip. If you believe grit, honesty, and family love as Jerry Rice lived still define America, hit subscribe to keep this flame burning with us. Thank you for joining this story of the legend who never dropped. See you in the next video, where we continue honoring those who turned pain into legacy.